will anybody come at Lamar Jackson with an offer sheet, or is he going to get Priscoed here?
He very well could get Priscoed here. I think that the tough thing is, and I do think it'd be wise if we had Breech kind of go through all the details of now what can happen over the course of the next few months. But my initial reaction to that is, I think there's one team. And I had said it earlier, like I thought it was Atlanta until Diana Rossini and Peter Schrager and so many others out there put out the report that they're not interested, which is it's a bit shocking, honestly. I mean, he's a huge upgrade for them. Arthur Smith, you can make the case on the hot seat if they don't win this year. And Arthur Blank has deep pockets, and we've seen him pay quarterbacks in the past like Matt Ryan. Now, maybe he regrets that because they didn't really have success after that, standpoint, or as much success as they had hoped. So maybe he wants to stay away from paying a guy $230 million in a total guaranteed contract, which is what he's looking for. The only other team that I think there's like a track record and history of this is the Washington Commanders. Dan Snyder has been known to want to bring in top talented guys. It's been a long time, but the Deion Sanders, the Bruce Smiths, those sorts of signings back in the day, he's got the pockets to be able to do it. And I also wonder if it's not, and dare I say, a distraction technique that maybe he would utilize too with everything else that's going on with the Washington Commanders. So I know someone just threw out the Raiders there. I don't know that that's the direction that they'll want to go. Because I don't know that Mark Davis is liquid enough to be able to put $230 million total guarantee in escrow. But B, the system that Josh McDaniels runs, they're in a position to draft a quarterback. It seems like Jimmy Garoppolo and a draft pick are probably the more likely scenario in Las Vegas.
So Breech, Brady mentioned this, and I think it is really important to touch on. With the non-exclusive franchise tag, things become really complicated in terms of what happens moving forward. Right. And look, like I've read the CBA a lot. Like I'm again a former notary, as everyone knows. Vast legal expertise. Thank you, Brady, for raising the roof. I feel comfortable, diving into the CBA. You can't have distractions though when you're doing it. You got to be laser focused because otherwise it is hard to concentrate on such thick prose from the union and the management. But like I think you interpreted it very well on our Slack channel. Any team can make him an offer sheet up until when? The date of the actual date to extend players off a normal franchise tag?
Right. And the deadline usually is July 15th, but that's on a Saturday this year, so it's July 17th. So any team out there can throw a contract, throw an offer sheet at Lamar and try to sign him between now and July 17th. The Ravens can also negotiate that long-term deal between now and July 17th. If something doesn't get done by then he can only play for the Ravens, and he has till the Tuesday after week 10 to sign that franchise tag, which rarely ever comes up. We saw it with Le'Veon Bell in 2018. So that is the one situation. I don't think things will get that far.
I was telling Brady about this too. Vincent Jackson did this as well. So did there's a lineman who did it. Who was it? There was a guard who did it the same year Vincent Jackson did. Was it for the Patriots? I'll look it up anyway. But like in the new CBA, you have not seen franchise tag players hold out for they just take the money and they come in and play. Le'Veon Bell being the only example of the new CBA.
Well, and we all saw how that worked out for him, not well. So I'm guessing that Lamar, looking at that, is thinking, all right, well, we don't want to take it that far. And one thing I will say, I wasn't really thinking about the Commanders as a landing spot, but Brady mentioning them is really fascinating because look, if you're Dan Snyder and you realize all the other owners hate you, what would be the biggest FU than handing out a fully guaranteed contract that the owners don't want to give out, then selling the team like a week later and saying, all right, peace out, have fun with that $270 million contract that I just gave Lamar Jackson, and I don't have to pay any of it because somebody else is buying the team. That's on Jeff Bezos now or whoever else is buying the team from me. So that would be pretty wild if Snyder went out like that. And the Falcons, like you guys said, seemed like the obvious spot. And for them to already be out on this, I mean, the thing is, things could change after the draft. If they're going after a quarterback in the draft, they don't get the guy they want or they don't want to trade up, and you find yourself on May 1st in a situation where you still need a quarterback and the Ravens haven't worked out a deal with Lamar Jackson yet, then boom, then you start talking to him then. So maybe they're out on him today. Maybe they're not after the draft. But it does seem like there's a few landing spots, but I don't think anybody's going to give him a fully guaranteed deal.
I think it is, and the Daniel Snyder thing is really fascinating because for the exact point that you note, Breech, if he believes he's being forced to sell, because I think you could arguably make the case, and now I wouldn't, I don't want to be careful here because I don't want to allege something that I have obviously no ability to prove. I just think that in the past we have heard the C word, aka collusion, thrown around. Now, if there were ever an opportunity for a group of fairly like-minded individuals who have one goal in mind to come together and to stop and put it into fully guaranteed contracts and make sure that Deshaun Watson is in fact not the norm, but an aberration, it would be for none of the other NFL owners and the NFL teams to pursue Lamar Jackson, knowing he needs a fully guaranteed deal. And that's why it's really interesting to hear immediately that the Panthers and the Falcons, especially teams that were involved in the Deshaun Watson like attempt to get him, are suddenly just not interested in Lamar Jackson. Like Brady, it kind of, there's a little bit of, it stinks a little bit.
It does. There's definitely a stench there. It doesn't make sense, too, considering Lamar Jackson's been a better player than Deshaun Watson over the course of his career. So if you're in on Deshaun, you figure, especially considering Lamar hasn't had some of the off-the-field issues that Deshaun Watson's dealt with, that you would be in on Jackson in this case. But you're also talking about a time, too, where both Carolina and Atlanta are in positions to be able to take a quarterback in the top 10. If the right guy falls to them, potentially move up. There's still a lot of time before the draft. So maybe that's more of the plan moving forward. I can't imagine that it's going to be Matt Corral in Carolina or Desmond Ridder in Atlanta moving forward. You'd have to be thinking that both these teams are potentially looking at either a free agent or a combination of that and looking at the draft as well. I guess I'd like to be naive to it as a player, thinking that there's not collusion amongst owners, but I do think there's kind of like an unwritten rule right now where no one's going to want to guarantee or have another fully guaranteed deal like that. It's the last thing that the owners want. It's something that the players haven't been able to unify well enough at any point in time to be able to go get. And even for guys like Kirk Cousins, who's tried to provide an example of a roadmap as to how to get it, you still see many guys don't follow suit. So I'll be curious to see how this works out. I mean, bottom line is, does a deal get done considering one hasn't gotten done with Baltimore, the team that drafted him? He doesn't have a representation. Does a deal get done if he finally signs up an agent? Like I do tend to think that like that's one of the things that's out there that like if he wants that guaranteed deal, he's going to find an agent, like someone who could actually go out there and negotiate these terms and figure out like where that's realistic and what team maybe they should be focusing on. If he, via the NFLPA, is trying to do this on his own or with the consultation of the NFLPA, I don't think they're going to have a better result when it's all said and done.
I think the issue for Lamar in terms of getting that fully guaranteed deal is I don't know that it happens with an agent. And the reason why is that I think an agent is going to push to, for one, I mean, like, look, if you have an agent, if you're a quarterback who has an agent and that agent doesn't get you a contract, he looks like an idiot. And people don't want to sign with anybody who can't get someone signed. Two, the agent is going to push to get money in his pocket.
For sure.
Right. So
but I would counter by saying this. He just doesn't, he's not going to need an agent then. Right. I think that's what he knows going into it.
Yeah.
He may be saying, I need you to give me the best deal possible. It's fully guaranteed. And then he can come back with those numbers. So if he doesn't like it, but the bottom line is he hasn't had an agent up to this point. I think the whole point of him getting an agent is to get that deal that he wants. I don't know that he's just going to listen to some guys pushing some of their deal that's not going to be there. He'll just say, I'll play under the franchise tag for another year.
Well, I think the flip side, though, real quick, is that if he is only willing to sign a fully guaranteed deal, then you don't need an agent because all your agent's going to say is he wants a fully guaranteed deal. There's no push or shove there. It's you get the fully guaranteed deal or you're not going to sign. So I think in that sense, if Lamar is dead set on getting a fully guaranteed deal, then he doesn't think he needs an agent because there's no negotiations to be had.
Now, there's the element of, I think, working with different teams and their front offices and understanding like what's realistically out there, right? I mean, maybe he's not going to get exactly what Deshaun Watson's deal is a 5-year fully guaranteed deal, but maybe he gets a shorter version of that. And that might be something that's a little more palatable, and you just need someone to go out and negotiate that for you. Again, we don't know what Lamar Jackson's thinking in the back of his mind or even who's helping him. I mean, at this point, I would imagine he's got some sort of management service, some sort of consultation outside of even the NFLPA helping with this.
Yeah, and look, like I'm with you. If he wants to get a deal done with the Ravens, getting an agent, yes, would he lose some money off the top, but he would ultimately get the deal done, and he would get close. I think it just boils down to, is he entrenched in this idea that he is going to get a fully guaranteed contract? Now, the question then becomes if he's willing to play out 2 more years of the franchise tag, which is because the Ravens will tag him again next year because you can go up to 120%. You can do non-exclusive, and no one's going to give him an offer next year if they don't this year. If he does that, then the question is, will somebody give him a fully guaranteed contract in free agency? Because there's a huge difference between doing fully guaranteed without the 2 first-round picks. I mean, that's, you feel like your team has a much better chance of being competitive, like keeping the 2 first-round picks than giving those up and signing a deal.
Can I ask this question? Is this the worst case scenario for Lamar, or would have been getting the exclusive franchise tag better?
This is worse because this is basically the Ravens playing chicken, but them feeling like they have all the leverage. Like, oh, you wanted a fully guaranteed deal from us? Well, guess what? We're going to give you non-exclusive tag. You go try and get it from someone else. They're not going to give it to you because not only do they have to give you all that money, but they have to give you 2 first-round draft picks. And the Ravens are basically daring any other NFL team to give him that deal. And then Lamar, if he can't get that deal, is going to have to tuck his tail between his legs, walk back to the Ravens, say, fine, all right, you guys were right. I'll take your deal with $160 million guaranteed or whatever. And then the Ravens will say, oh, now it's $140 million guaranteed because you didn't take it back when you had it before. So I do feel like this is worst case scenario for Lamar.
Yeah, and then again, let's just on the hypothetical of collusion. Last I find myself being thrown in court by the NFL. Not that the NFL owners are that worried about this, but I'm saying like in the hypothetical of of this collusion case, which by the way, it wouldn't be unprecedented for the NFLPA to file a collusion claim on behalf of Lamar. We've seen that in recent years. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm just saying it wouldn't be a precedent.
It doesn't go anywhere anyways. Like then they're just like, harumph. We look for collusion. Harumph.
Yeah, but I'm saying like if you're the Baltimore Ravens and you are aware of generally an interest in the NFL owners if keeping fully guaranteed deals off the table, and you can kind of quickly do the math, right? So like you can say, okay, the Bengals, we don't need to talk to the Bengals about this. They don't want fully guaranteed contracts out there because they've got Joe Burrow coming up. We don't need to talk to the Chargers about this. They've got, Justin Herbert coming up. We don't need to talk to the Raiders. Mark Davis isn't even a billionaire. He's like half a billionaire. Oh my God. And but you can go through the list and find like there's a short number of teams that you need to basically say, we're not coming after Lamar. And all of a sudden it completely evaporates all of his leverage. It explains what the market is to him from the market's perspective. And if you have that knowledge of what your peers are thinking on other teams, it makes it a lot easier to play that game of chicken. And so in this hypothetical that we're discussing, I don't know, it feels like a very good possibility.
Let's talk about timing though too, because I don't know that Breech got to talk about like every little detail of it, right? Yeah. Because he has basically up until now, and is it till July 17th or the 22nd, Breech, where teams can submit offer sheets to be able to potentially get his services, and the 2 first-round picks would go to Baltimore. Is that the time frame to get a long-term deal negotiated?
Right, July 17th, that any other team can send that offer sheet in. And then, the later it is, the end in the 16th, the Ravens have to turn around quickly, decide if they're going to match it. And then obviously if they don't, the Ravens get the 2 first-round picks. So July 17th.
So the interesting thing about that, though, is like not every team is able to really negotiate with them. Like Will and I were talking about this before the show. Like the Dolphins can't until after the 2023 draft because they don't have a first-round pick, right?
Well, here's what's interesting, Brady. Just the timing of it. It's so weird how these teams have already decided this. Jeff Darlington, or our pal Jeff Darlington, who lives down your way, the Dolphins will not be pursuing Lamar Jackson or any other starting quarterbacks this offseason. Multiple team sources tell me, as one source said, Mike fully believes Tua is a perfect fit for his system. This so they're not interested in Lamar Jackson, despite heavy rumblings. Of Tom Brady. It's like if Tom Brady signs in Miami and the Dolphins like came out with this, we're not pursuing Lamar, like 5 minutes after Lamar gets the non-exclusive tag, you can kind of connect the dots there.
Yeah. I'm really hoping, by the way, for a Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski reunion in Miami. Anyway, but so to that point, Miami's not pursuing him, but like teams like the Rams, Browns, not that they would either, 49ers, they wouldn't be able to either, at least not until after the draft, even if they wanted to, because they don't have the consecutive years first-round picks. However, they could agree essentially, though, to a sign and trade, right? He signs the tag. They trade then, for him from Baltimore, whatever that compensation is negotiated, and that team agrees to a long-term deal. That is still on the table, correct?
Yeah. For instance, Lamar could sign now, and he wouldn't. And this is where, as we pointed out with the agent stuff, it gets really tricky because you don't have an agent. Like an agent's sole job would be to work with the various teams that might have interest in you.
But you guys said he doesn't need one, so I'm just.
I didn't say he didn't need one.
I only said he didn't need one if he is dead set on getting a fully guaranteed deal, or there's nothing to. Hey, don't call me unless your offer is fully guaranteed. In that case, he doesn't need one. Every other case, he does.
For instance, let's just say hypothetically that the San Francisco 49ers were interested in Lamar Jackson and they wanted to work on a deal where it's a sign and trade. Well, without an agent, it is really hard because you have to negotiate one with the Ravens who are going to, you can say like, listen, you're going to sign this tender. This trade's going to happen. You sign the tender, and then the Ravens and the 49ers have to negotiate compensation. The agent for Lamar would be involved in that, like discussing, like just helping to facilitate, like, not the specifics of it, but just helping to facilitate and talking to the teams. And then you got to negotiate another deal with the 49ers. So without an agent, man, that sign and trade becomes really difficult. It seems to me that this may come down to whether or not Lamar Jackson is willing to leave. I guess it would be 10 weeks of prorated salary on the 10 weeks of like 32 something $million on the table and to sit out for the full season, or whether he will eventually just sign the tender, show up, play on the 32 million. Because unless it's Washington coming in rogue, it doesn't look like anybody's going to. The quickness with which these teams like leak this information that they are not interested in the former MVP available for 2 first-round picks is startling. So that I think.
I wonder how much of the behind the scenes too has kind of gotten around the league, and just from people that I know within the Baltimore Ravens organization is people have talked about him being kind of a handful. As great of a player as he is, there's some things that they obviously haven't appreciated in regards to how he's handled himself in a number of ways. So that may be something too that makes him a little less attractive, especially as you're coming on a draft class now that you have 4 quarterbacks you could look at and say, could be first-round talents. You have 2 that are probably better than any of the quarterbacks in this year's draft class and next year's, right, in Caleb Williams and Drake May. And that's not to say there's not going to be more along with that class. So I think if you're a team that's looking for a quarterback in the short term, right now you're probably looking at some of your prospects saying, I feel like this guy's going to be a lot cheaper and maybe a much less headache that I have to deal with when I'm talking about what Lamar Jackson might bring along with him.
No doubt about it. All right, let's move on.
And real quick, salary cap space is a huge issue.
Yeah,
because he wants, if you're talking about $50 million per year, fully guaranteed, there are only 2 teams that even have $50 million in cap space right now, the Falcons and the Bears. And of course, teams can make cap space, but then that's another thing that those teams have to worry about before they can go out and make an offer to Lamar. So, there are a lot of moving parts there to even give him an offer.
Would you say the liquidity issue too, and just having enough cash to be able to pay him what he's looking for in order to make it work? That's another restraint. Like, I think we're actually getting to a point now when you look across the NFL with all these quarterbacks who have contracts are up, where that's going to become a huge issue moving forward as far as the haves and have-nots and how they're able to at least sign on their quarterbacks and build a roster that's able to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and very quickly too. And I don't really believe this. I do think that there will be teams in the league who might think this. Like, all right, we're trading 2 first-round picks for Lamar Jackson, and we're signing to this massive extension. Do we then have to fit a system around him? Do you have to bring it, like most teams have already, everybody's already hired their coach and their offensive coordinator and brought in their coaching staffs. And like, for instance, the Panthers, I don't know the answer to this with Frank Reich, but it's entirely possible that Frank Reich, is like, hey, look, like talking to Tepper and talking to Scott Fitterer, the GM, the owner, David Tepper, of course, and saying, Lamar is an incredible player. I don't know that for the cost from a contract and the cost from the draft pick perspective, especially holding number 9, that this is the right move, given our system. So like that part of that is reasonable with them as well. The Falcons one is weird because he would fit perfectly in what Arthur Smith wants to do.